Just over Vinewood Hills lies the Grand Sonora Desert. Housed inside of that desert also lies Sandy Shores, a small, rundown town. But unlike most rundown towns, this one still has residents and power, but currently is in a poor state of condition as is. A quick drive through Sandy Shores lets you get a better look at the residents and their homes. This already gives us some clues about a time when Sandy Shores was sprawling with life and success. Most of these homes are colorful, yellow, blue, red, pink, you name it, which was a common element of the American home design in the 1950s and 1960s. Full of color, usually one story, with no garage, as vehicles weren't nearly as common to see as they are now. Almost a one-to-one identical description of the typical Sandy Shores home. The buildings also tell us about the businesses that were here prior. We can see a mechanic shop, a barber shop, a tattoo shop, a medical center, and a sheriff's office. Some of these businesses are still operating, but judging by the exterior, these businesses are by no means prospering. And while there are some buildings that are still standing, most of the buildings in Sandy Shores are completely run down and abandoned, like the Sandy Shores Motel. This is likely due to the failing economy at the time. But why was the economy on the decline, you may ask? It could be the fact that a booming city just on the other side of the Vinewood Hills with promising job opportunities and infrastructure was on the rise, driving the workforce to move there to be closer to their jobs and family, as they likely moved there as well. Paleto Bay could have been in a similar situation in Sandy Shores as well, but powered through because of its major factory, the Cluck and Bell factory, which required a larger workforce to operate, which likely gave them stable job security. Unfortunately, for Sandy Shores' case, they didn't have any stable job opportunities unlike Paleto Bay. Most businesses in Sandy Shores were prone to tourism, which is almost always a bad thing, as the strength of the economy shifts from month to month. Nobody is visiting Sandy Shores in the winter. The lack of job stability could have also influenced the rise of drugs and arms smuggling that Sandy Shores is all too familiar with now. Not too many cops to deal with, and the ones there are to deal with are likely to cut a deal with smugglers to boost their own pay, to just put food on the table for their own families. Not to mention the outright lack of outside agencies present in Blaine County, as officials likely think that it is just an abandoned town that is too far gone to help anymore. So with all this in mind, why is Sandy Shores still a town? And why don't officials try to help Sandy Shores more? Well, the answer to that is very simple. They use the fact that it is run down with a very little population to their advantage. There is a prison just outside Sandy that is very hard to escape out of because of its location. If you try to make the daring escape to Los Santos, you will likely get seen by the many residents and be called in to your arrest. If you try to make the flee towards the desert in Sandy Shores, you will suffer from the blistering heat in the daytime and the shivering cold of the night. Not even mentioning the scarce amenities there are in Blaine County. It's not like there are many places to eat and drink in Sandy Shores, leaving the only viable option to escape to Paleto. However, it is just too far and risky to attempt. Despite most of Blaine County being abandoned or close to it, there are some parts that appear to be doing just fine, like Harmony. There is a small strip mall with a couple of businesses that also houses a Fleeca Bank branch, the only bank in all of Sandy Shores, which could be the reason why it is still standing. There is zero competition. Harmony also has a small motel, which, while not looking perfect, seems to be doing just fine. It looks like if there's any bit of tourist activity or somebody just needing a place to stay for a little bit, Harmony could be the place to go instead of Sandy Shores. Now we must discuss the gangs of Sandy Shores. Well, first off, there is the one we are all too familiar with, Trevor Phillips Enterprises, and the O'Neill brothers, which live not too far out of town in a town called Grapeseed. And then there's the Lost Motorcycle Club, which has a headquarters just outside of Sandy Shores in a small trailer park called Stab City. However, like previously mentioned earlier, there is a sheriff's office located in the middle of Sandy Shores. Unfortunately, like also mentioned earlier, the sheriff's office is fairly small, and the workforce of that sheriff's office is also very small, making them very prone to being paid off or just outright being killed. It seems like from the looks of it, there's not enough enforcement going on in Sandy Shores, but no one bothers to enforce it because it's already too far gone or they're benefiting from it. And not just crackhead hillbillies are benefiting from it. Think about it. There is a military base not too far away, a prison like previously mentioned, and the Humane Labs, which seems to conduct experiments not really shown to the FIB or the IAA. It seems like the officials are even taking advantage of Sandy Shores' desolate state. All of this makes Sandy Shores feel like such a creepy place to me. It's always been strange how there's almost no lighting, and the lighting that there is dim. Not to mention the tallest mountain in the game, Mount Chiliad, reigning supreme over the town of Sandy Shores and its residents. So with all this in mind, we can now answer the question, was Sandy Shores always abandoned? No, it wasn't. It was likely a decently popular town in the 1950s or 60s, but due to better job opportunities located elsewhere, was left in a poor state that nobody cared to fix, as both state officials and criminals benefited from its demise, using it for both of their operations, and that is unlikely to change anytime soon. Just north of Mount Chiliad lies the town of Paleto Bay. It's a relatively small town, but unlike its next-door neighbor Sandy Shores, Paleto seems to be doing just fine. But how? Paleto Bay is smaller than Sandy and further south. Well, as explained in the Sandy Shores video, Paleto Bay has a major factory, the Clucking Bell factory, which most of the residents probably work at. There are also numerous shops in the small town of Paleto, including a barber shop, a tattoo shop, a mechanic shop, and a gun store. Also, there seem to have been plans to build a car dealership next to the mechanic shop, but it was never completed. We know this was fully intentional by Rockstar, as it says on the billboard that it was supposed to come in 2008, but the game at the time of release took place in 2013. So why was this dealership never completed? Well, here is where we get into the many problems of Paleto Bay. It seems that the city planners of Paleto Bay didn't distribute business space and living space evenly. Lots of buildings in Paleto Bay are businesses, which is fine if you have the workforce to accommodate them, but Paleto just doesn't have that many homes to accommodate a growing population. There are 36 houses in Paleto Bay, some of which could barely be called as such due to the condition of them. Also, some of these houses are for sale, meaning that there are likely not any residents living inside of them currently. There clearly isn't enough homes to accommodate the people that would be working in these businesses. This essentially means that Paleto Bay has to rely on workers who live out of town to make the trip all the way north every day, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is not great either. This makes workers at the mercy of the weather, as if the weather is harsh, the workers likely will not show up or be late. This whole catastrophe of a situation is only occurring, however, because of poor city planning. The dealership that clearly isn't being finished should be turned into affordable apartments to allow for more residents. There is a small apartment complex located in Paleto Bay, but it maybe has a dozen rooms, not very much for a sprawling population. And the condition of these apartments are clearly not very good. There's not even water in the pool. Also, the plot of land that the dealership would be on is quite big, so it should be able to accommodate this just fine. We can already gather from this information that Paleto Bay already has essential problems that should have been changed a long time ago, or should never have been there to begin with. So what should Paleto Bay city officials done from the start? They should have played the tourism card much harder than they did. They have an advantage over Sandy as they also tried to do this, but over time just deteriorated and laid to waste. Paleto is right next to the ocean. Hotels should have been built, at least 2 or more. Development also should have went into the coastal side of town because as of now, there are not that many buildings on the coast. There are maybe a couple, and all of these buildings are in questionable conditions. Then there is the Paleto Forest, which is actually quite a beautiful place. There should have been more effort into advertising its national park and the Chiliad wilderness. And then after people take a visit there, maybe after taking a long hike, they could settle down for the night at a hotel in Paleto. They wouldn't go to Sandy, as Sandy is just a bit too far out of town from the Chiliad wilderness. Paleto Bay just makes more sense, and it has a nicer view. Local officials also should have marketed Mount Chiliad as part of the local lore as being the tallest mountain in the state of San Andreas, and try to encourage people to hike up it as well, with maybe some rewards. I also somewhat believe that the Clucking Bell factory hurt Paleto indirectly, as it made it less visually appealing. Just imagine that you are on vacation somewhere at a remote northern town that is relatively small, and see a big factory towering over the area. It just wouldn't look nice. And while there is also a small motel that is actually not that bad looking, with a very craftsman aesthetic to it just outside of Paleto, the infrastructure is just not there to support such a tourism-reliant business. So why don't city officials try to repair Paleto Bay's damaged image? Well, here's where we get into the illicit side of Paleto Bay. As previously mentioned, the Clucking Bell factory hurt Paleto's image as a small tourism town as any major factory would. But why was it made and put here in the first place? Well, we now know that a local cartel utilizes the Clucking Bell factory's image and location to smuggle drugs across San Andreas. It is unclear how long this operation has been going on, but we know that it is indeed here. And unfortunately, this cartel also likely has deep ties with local city officials to keep the factory up, as if it was demolished, there would be no cover for the cartel's smuggling work. It also helps the cartel that Paleto is very far from everything. Sandy Shores is already far from the city, and this is referenced many times in the game. After the mission friends reunited, Trevor takes a trip up to the Vinewood Hills, and Wade comments on how that's very far, and how he has a cousin living there. But he talks about Los Santos as if it's such a far away place. Paleto is very far from everything, allowing for more underground operations to take place, as federal officials are unlikely to investigate and monitor such a small, faraway town. This is highly likely to be the reason that Paleto is in the state that it is in currently. A similar situation to Sandy, only with more proof. If Paleto were to grow more and more, the population would rise and start to become less of a small town and more of a medium-sized tourist destination. This would lead city officials to monitor it more and just keep track of it more as a whole. So hopefully, as time passes and Vincent's investigation progresses, we may see the downfall of this cartel and the potential rise of Paleto Bay. Hopefully Vincent can work his way up the ladder to a higher agency like the FIB and crack down on the cartel and their operation. But only time will tell. Paleto Bay is a very strange place overall. It is one of the only places in the game that you can go to in a fully populated lobby and barely see anyone there because of its location, which basically sums up Paleto Bay as a whole. Which is also precisely the reason why I enjoy being in Paleto Bay, its desolation. I just wish there were more things to do in Paleto. There are many available businesses here, but no one, including myself, ever buys them because it is just too far away to use efficiently as a business. For something leisurely, then sure, fine. But for something that you have to go to every time you log on to GTA Online, it's just inconvenient. I think for a final update, or an update very near the end of GTA Online's lifespan, Paleto Bay should get a small makeover, with a coastal hotel, similar to a hotel you'd see in Miami on the beach. Rockstar could also use this opportunity to add fishing to the game, as Paleto is obviously equipped for it with this location. I do know that Red Dead Redemption 2 has a fishing mechanic, and it's pretty good. I, however, don't know how easy it would be to port over to GTA Online, but maybe Rockstar could make something like it. Also similar to Red Dead, they could maybe also add horses to the game, as strangely enough, there are horse crossing signs scattered around Blaine County. Sometimes you see them in different places, but they are indeed there, which kinda maybe leads me to believe that horses were meant to be in the game since day one. We obviously know that Rockstar is not a person to skimp out on cutting content, so we may never know. But it is definitely not too late to add horses. So next time you're in Paleto Bay, enjoy it a little bit, explore its environment, and learn more about the desolate town and its people. And hopefully, Rockstar starts to appreciate it a little bit more as well. Just to the northeast side of San Andreas lies the small town of Grapeseed, which honestly seems like a pretty standard area. But does this small town have history to it that makes it slightly less ordinary? Well, today, we will be answering that very question. Since Grapeseed also borders the Alamo Sea, which Sandy Shores also borders, the same issues apply to Grapeseed as well. But Grapeseed does have its own unique and unfortunate circumstances that distinguish it from Sandy Shores. A majority of the land in Grapeseed is farmland, leaving not that much room for homes and other businesses. This is not too big of an issue though, because as mentioned in the case of Paleto Bay, the workforce can be from out of town. However, this puts a lot of dependency on the farmland itself, basically driving the economy of Grapeseed as a whole. This is almost always a bad thing, especially in the case of farming, when you have off seasons where produce is not that valuable and hard to come by. Also, like previously mentioned, Grapeseed is right next to the Alamo Sea, which likely was a large water source for the farmland in its heyday. However, over time, the Alamo Sea became polluted and basically destroyed a major source of water for Grapeseed, which also likely made the crop quality itself worse and lessened production. Some may say that Grapeseed could have had to get water from the nearby ocean. However, there is no infrastructure for this, as officials probably thought that the Alamo Sea would never get polluted. Thus, there is no need for redundancy. And if you think there was a stream from the nearby ocean going into Grapeseed, like I initially did, this is actually just water runoff for the rain, as there is a big cliff on the coast, meaning pipes would be needed to transfer water, but there are none visible to us. What's interesting about Grapeseed is that it was never intended to grow more than it could. It was always supposed to be a small farm town, and this is once again reflected in the buildings. There are only a few businesses in Grapeseed, including a clothing store, a paint shop, a farmer's market, an arcade, and a gas station. However, half of the businesses I just named are out of business, which is a sign of the times, unfortunately. Also, by this time, most of the farmland is not operating, with it even being on sale, which goes to show how hard of a sell it is due to the poor local area. There is, however, a small factory just outside of Grapeseed, but it seems to have no relation to Grapeseed as a whole. The workforce that runs the factory is likely from out of town, and the factory itself is not in the best condition. That could be, however, due to its age and general area, being right next to the desert. I also found something pretty strange about these silos. There is a sign that says HJ Silos, Galileo Park. However, I found no relation of this factory to Galileo Park, and while it's not uncommon for companies to have the location in which they were established as part of the company name, you can't establish yourself at a park. But aside from that, there is nothing else to be seen here. There is also a small airfield in Grapeseed that I will brush over as of now, but will be important later in the story. So while all else is failing, there is nothing for Grapeseed to rely on, making the current state of it extremely run down, just like its next door neighbor, Sandy Shores. And unfortunately, just like Sandy Shores, the state of Grapeseed made way for the same problem that plagues Sandy Shores even today: crooks and smugglers. Here is where the airfield comes into play. This allows out-of-state smugglers to stop through Grapeseed and run illicit goods through the area. The airfield seems to be relatively makeshift, as there are no other buildings other than the main small hangar to suggest that this was once a commercial airport, other than the small trailer which likely came with the smugglers. Unfortunately, this only fueled criminal organizations to utilize Grapeseed's local economy and isolated location, making it essentially Sandy Shores all over again, just on a much smaller scale. There is even a small house located just out of town that seems to be growing a kind of crop. You can use your imagination so as to identify just what kind of crop is being grown here. Unfortunately, the owner of this property is never shown to us in the game, but it is likely just a solo smuggler, or at least that is all the property leads onto. There is also another house located just outside of Grapeseed on the eastern coast. But unlike the other home, this home seems to be pretty legit, as it's growing pumpkins and cabbage. Although it is important to mention that a drug deal was facilitated here once in the heist of Series A funding by Trevor, but the deal goes sour and Trevor escapes. So I don't know if the house is owned by an unrelated person or someone involved in the criminal world, but there is no evidence to suggest either. There is also a small fishing village pretty close to Grapeseed, but fortunately for the people here, it seems to be rather unaffected by Grapeseed's situation. Aside from the Alamo Sea being polluted, there is also a boat shop and a fishery that seem to be owned by someone with the name Miller. This Miller character is never shown to us in-game though, so they are probably unrelated. However, not all hope is lost for Grapeseed. It seems that some locals still use the animal farms for cows and chickens. Animal farms are usually much more reliable than crops, as they don't vary much with the time of year from what I know. So hopefully, with time, the locals could restore Grapeseed to a better state, which would also be putting it on the radar as a legit local town, leading government officials to take notice of it, and hopefully drive the smugglers out of the area. In modern time, the O'Neills are dead, which was the main criminal organization of Grapeseed, and there are not that many criminals still in Grapeseed, with only the document forgery shop being available there to online players. So criminals mainly just use it to run goods through, but not necessarily as a hub, which is good for the foreseeable future and the overall state of Grapeseed as a whole. I personally think Grapeseed could have benefited from more missions in online. Sometimes you are sent to go there, but only for resupply missions and such. No storyline driven DLC takes place in Grapeseed. There is a DLC, of course, the Doomsday Heist, which takes place at the mountain next to Grapeseed, which is of course Mount Chiliad, but not the small town of Grapeseed as a whole. Unfortunately, this doesn't give us much to work with about the lore of Grapeseed, leading us to assume much of its local lore. But in my opinion, Grapeseed is still a fun town to visit, and you should go there soon. To the southeast side of Los Santos lies the area of Davis, and just by taking a quick drive through the area, you can see the rough-looking condition of the buildings and many businesses. But why is Davis like this? Davis has room for housing, multiple businesses in and around the area, its own police department, and many more commodities that are crucial to a strong local economy. But it remains struggling in a state of constant gang wars and violence. So today, we will dive into the city of Davis and try to identify faults that could have led to its fall. Or maybe there are none, and Davis's demise is a making of its own. As previously mentioned, Davis has everything an economy needs to succeed, but it just didn't. Well, firstly, we need to state the obvious and acknowledge the sheer amount of gang violence that is present in Davis. Roughly about 3/4 of the city of Davis is occupied by one of the many gangs present in the city, including the Vagos, the Ballers, and the Families. Just these gangs being present in Davis is already terrible, but these gangs cause heavy amounts of violence, and from an outsider's perspective, this obviously does not look good, discouraging possible future residents of the city just by having that associated image. This being said, many of the residents of Davis are not there by choice. They are there due to the low cost of living, so the type of person living in Davis is likely to do whatever just to make ends meet, including crime. This leads to many of the residents joining gangs or having some sort of affiliation to a gang. And you think that the police would try to stop this gang violence, but as we will discuss later, it's not so cut and dry. Also, Davis is pretty poorly funded on a city level. Sure, it has the essentials that it needs to succeed, but there are almost no redundancies to stop any sort of structural issue, like crime, from plaguing the city. City officials do not try to remedy the problem with maybe a bigger budget or reinforcing core infrastructure designs because to them, Davis is already far gone. But is it really? Apart from the crime, Davis is not really a bad area. Sure, the streets are a bit rough and whatnot, but at its core, Davis has good weather, is close to downtown Los Santos, and has its own dedicated police force. If the city put together a strong enough gang unit to clean the streets and get criminals in jail, then Davis could maybe rebuild with time. This will not and cannot happen overnight though. Gangs are like plagues that don't go away very easily. It's a mentality for some people, and unfortunately, they likely think that this is the only way they can survive. But over time, as these gangs get disbanded and the people in charge of running these gangs get behind bars, the streets can start to heal. But why haven't they yet? Why hasn't action taken place yet? Does the city even want to fix the many problems plaguing Davis? You'd think the answer to these questions would be very simple. Of course the city wants to better itself. It wants a stronger economy and people. But maybe it doesn't. But now you may be asking why it doesn't. Well, when there is crime, generally speaking, there is money to be made by the government or local officials. Like when people get tickets, the city collects the revenue from it. And also when people are in jail, the city can argue to higher officials for more need of resources to house more people and whatnot. It also keeps the crime somewhat contained to the city of Davis. Sure, Los Santos is not exactly crime-free, but in a sense, the crime is somewhat contained in Davis to that extent. All of this could explain why action has not been taken yet on a city level, but is definitely not the definitive answer, just a strong theory. Before we move on, I'd like to take a second to appreciate the level of strange area design that takes place in Davis. So many streets do not make any sense at all, and I swear every time I go to Davis, I find a new street that makes even less sense than the street I saw prior. This is not to say that there are not areas of the map that have strange design as well, or design that doesn't make sense when you take a closer look, but in Davis, it happens more often. I don't know if Rockstar did this to convey the sloppy, neglected state of Davis as a whole, or if it is just the result of a rushed area possibly. But whatever the reason is, the result is certainly strange and comedic. Unfortunately, Davis didn't get that much representation in GTA 5's story. I get that the area is rather small and there is not much room to expand it, but I always felt like more could have been done with the area. Maybe have us tail someone in the Davis Mega Mall, which doesn't have an interior, and follow them into a house to recover drugs or something. The streets of Davis are also pretty small and intricate. A long police chase could have happened with us having to bail on foot and lose the cops that way. We possibly could have gotten this in GTA Online with the rumored Cops and Robbers update that never came to fruition, unfortunately. It is speculated that it never released due to the current state of law enforcement in America in real life at the time. It was just after the tragic death of George Floyd, and skepticism and hatred towards police was at an all-time high. But now all of that has died down, so maybe in the future we could still possibly get this update. There are so many creative ways the area of Davis could have been used, but just was not, unfortunately. But the area we do have is such a great canvas that can still be expanded upon. Also, a pretty well-known fact at this point is that Rockstar hired actual gang members and ex-gang members of Los Angeles gangs to do some voiceover work for some of the NPCs in-game for the area, which I still think is crazy and awesome at the same time. We can only hope that GTA 6 gets this same treatment, but only time will tell. Davis has such a homey feel to it that I adore. Probably because a majority of my initial time playing Grand Theft Auto 5 was in Davis as Franklin. I remember missing school because I was sick, and staying home and playing GTA 5 driving around Davis as Franklin doing missions and whatnot. They are such good memories that I'm glad I had, and I wish they could be expanded upon today. But like mentioned earlier, Davis has kind of met its limits, at least for now. However, we have just gotten news as of me recording this video that Rockstar is releasing some sort of bounty hunter, bail bond agent update. We don't know what this entails, but Davis is a great canvas for this update, and hopefully some unique missions take place here. But as I said, this is still ongoing, and we don't know too much as of now, so we'll have to see. Feel the breeze of the Los Santos smog on the Del Perro Pier. It's a beautiful place to be when you're not seeing tweakers or being harassed by the Del Perro PD. But with those luxuries comes a luxury price tag. Even the shadiest, old-looking apartment will still go for $6,000 on the market.
And you may be thinking, what fool would pay that? Well, it's probably a Mirror Park hipster who wants to get away from the suburban soccer moms and get into the thrilling nightlife of the coast. And you can fully embrace your inner Vinewood hipster and get a tattoo at the local parlor. Probably of another religious quote from the Bible that you don't read, and now you have all the Epsilonists asking questions about converting you to follow in the ways of Chris Formage himself. And now you're probably stressing about getting the tattoo removed via laser. But luckily for you, you were also dumb enough to pay a few $1,000 to live right by the beach. So why not utilize it? You can take a stroll on the pier and look down on all the suburban moms from Mirror Park who can only visit Del Perro while you live there. Then at the end of the day, they still have to return to their home, only to find out that dad has put the vanilla unicorn tab on the joint bank account with mom. That'll make for an interesting conversation at the local burger shop. But if you're trying to convince yourself that you live a healthy life overall, even though you have a Heartstopper combo from Burger Shot at least 3 times a week, you can hit up the local tennis court and probably play against ex-strippers of the vanilla unicorn that caught themselves a big fish and landed a husband in the Rockford Hills, only for them to think that he stopped going there after he met her. But if you don't care to convince people that you're totally healthy, even though you are not, then you can always embrace your inner typical middle-aged retiree and buy yourself a boat and go boating on the shores of Los Santos. Of course, make sure to keep the boat above the water. We don't want another submersible accident on our hands. I'm looking at you, Devin Weston. And if you're well off enough, you might even be able to get yourself a Galaxy super yacht. Or if you happen to be a female who got a BBL and breast implants courtesy of your local rich baby daddy from Leonida, you might even be able to come on the yacht free of charge. Of course, the owner happens to be some obscure billionaire who has the Vespucci Police Department in his pockets, but that's fine so long as you don't speak of your time aboard the yacht. It's not like anyone will believe you anyways. But this life has its budget, and you need to be able to afford that Botox somehow. So of course, you get the most exciting job available at the time, a corporate assistant at the local cell tower. Now you don't get to live the life you wanted, but you get to see it every day from the view of your corner cubicle window. And you would maybe be thinking that you'd be making enough money to sustain yourself, but you can barely afford a triple burger from Up and Atom. And that is why you should vote Cranley for the 2024 election. Of course, he's had numerous scandals in his year of politics, but that just goes to show that he's more seasoned and daring, willing to bend the rules for the people and probably you, even though he won't. So the corporate job ain't looking too bad, but now you have to try your luck at cockatoos because the pay ain't doing too well. At least the clientele there is nicer than your old desk partner, am I right? So Del Perro may seem about the fakest place you can get in Los Santos, but luckily for you, and surprisingly enough, it is not. Los Santos as a whole is just as big of a facade as you can get in southern San Andreas. And that is precisely the problem with the whole of Los Santos. Everybody says, move there, your dreams will come true. Move there, work hard enough, and you will be one of the stars. You might even be on the Vinewood Walk of Fame. But the reality is not so nice, and most of the time, you either end up homeless or dead, or both. Fortunately for you, if you don't end up dead, you might just end up in the homeless district of Los Santos. And of course, you will get bystanders every day looking down on you with shame because they probably think you're too lazy to do anything with your life, even though they're probably on the same track that you were on, just a couple of steps behind. And hey, maybe not having a home in Los Santos is good for you after all. I mean, you do get free food, granted if you could find it, and you do get a Cranley phone free of charge. Granted, the government is also probably watching you on that, but your life isn't that interesting, so who really cares? Of course, around this time, you have probably already made a Life Invader account, and you're posting about how fantastic your life is. Even though, of course, you're catfishing and you're homeless currently, and you're posting from a Jock Cranley phone and not some sort of iFruit phone at all. But who cares because they can't tell the difference, and that's the great thing about Los Santos and Vespucci. It is a place for posers, a place where people can go to live out their fantasies, but not their reality. And matter of fact, it may stay that way for a very long time, and for the city that is perfectly fine. Because the city brings in revenue from all the traffic that comes in from the beach, And all the tourism, all the tourists that come from different countries, they want to see what Los Santos has to offer. They go down to the beach and all they see is a couple of crackheads and maybe the occasional movie star, if they're lucky. Or if you want to be the one enforcing the non-existent laws in Vespucci and be part of a department owned by an obscure billionaire, then you might want to consider joining the Vespucci Police Department. You get a free gun, free training, and you get to shoot people without cause. Of course, you have to hope that the billionaire bails you out with his lawyers, but he probably will, let's be honest. He got the best lawyers San Andreas can offer. Or if you even want to take it a step further, you can become a politician and be close friends with the billionaire. Until a story comes out that the billionaire is human trafficking, and then you have to say that you were only loose friends with him and you didn't really know the guy too much at all, when indeed there are conversations that are documented by the government of you guys chilling and being on his private island. But that's a made up situation and we won't talk about that any further. So maybe this is all too much for you. Maybe you don't care to be a poser at all. You don't want the fast life of Los Santos or Del Perro. Well, luckily for you, Blaine County is just the place. You may be asking, why Blaine County? Why not Mirror Park? Why not Vinewood? Davis even? Well, the facade that people carry in Vespucci is not exclusive to that city like previously stated. It spreads to all boroughs of Los Santos, and with it, the cost of living. So it seems that the only place you can afford is a trailer in Blaine County. It's a nice place when you exclude the meth heads and locals who look like they just reproduced with their sister. And if you don't believe me, just ask Mr. Phillips himself.
Go fuck yourself!
And that is the lovely city of Del Perro. It's a nice place if you can afford it. Of course you can't though. But it's always nice to visit even if you don't fit in. Because the truth is, everyone fits in Del Perro. From sketchy billionaires, retirees, hosts of bad talk shows, and minorities from all places around the world. And that is the motto of Vespucci Beach. The Vinewood Hills is a prestigious area of Los Santos, reserved only for those that can afford it, or pull enough strings to be able to afford it. The typical Vinewood Hills resident could vary greatly, from foreigners who worked hard enough to be able to afford the area, or women who had children with a wealthy man from there, thus forcing the man to take care of the woman and child, either through child support or by having them underneath his household. Either way, it's certainly a wealthy area that has lots of privacy, which is one of the main selling points. The hills provide natural protection from everything but the weather and the occasional coyote. But the Vinewood Hills don't have a direct entrance to get in, so there is no gate to enter the community, but obviously, why would you go there if you didn't live there? Maybe to see your favorite movie star's home, but hopefully, and likely, they have security to watch you. And you'd maybe think that the people in these homes would be happy. Money solves all problems, right? Well, it seems that only people without a lot of money seem to think that way, while those with money know that that is not true. However, they do not want you to know this. They put on a facade and act for you to envy them. There are many reasons for this, far too many to discuss here. But overall, they want you to think that they are happy, so you chase the life that they have, buy the products that they are likely endorsed by, and try to be like them. But in reality, you do not want to be like them. And today, we will dive into the biggest facade in San Andreas, the Vinewood Hills. Most of Vinewood's city income comes from the extremely high taxes imposed on the residents that reside there. Property tax on a multi-million-dollar home is extremely high, and then you have upkeep with the house that needs to be taken care of. But a good amount of the city's income comes from tourism as well. Tourists visiting the Vinewood sign and taking pictures there, going on Vinewood Boulevard and seeing the stars stamped in the floor. Just fundamentally speaking, Vinewood prints money for purely existing. And the city doesn't have to do all that much to keep that image. The streets don't necessarily have to be clean, because you can't prevent homeless people from going to places that are generally nicer, and you will see them there occasionally. But just keep up with landscaping and national advertising, and Vinewood will continue to do numbers. But how did the empire of Vinewood start to begin with? Was it always the cash cow that it is now? And can it be replicated elsewhere? Well, Vinewood probably had humble beginnings with very little homes. Some of the homes that were there from the beginning can still be seen today. We can tell these homes are original because of their overall appearance. These few homes were there to begin with, probably just as a way to live without being involved with the hustle and bustle of the city, an area to get away to in a sense. But with that came a high cost even from the start because of the simple supply and demand dynamics, but because of the privacy these homes offered, while also being within driving distance from the city. These homes eventually attracted movie stars and public figures. It would be very hard to replicate a similar economy to Vinewood because it would be a slow investing strategy. Vinewood built this prestige image over time, mostly because of the people that live there, like previously stated. So trying to do something similar would take time and may not be guaranteed the same success as Vinewood to begin with. Something rather interesting about Vinewood is that much like Davis, it didn't get too much representation in story mode, particularly the Vinewood Hills. There are only a couple of main story missions that take place there, and most of them take place at Franklin's house. There are a few Strangers and Freaks missions that take place there, but they immediately take you out the area. It would have been very nice to get maybe a home invasion robbery, maybe fit in a couple of story missions prior to the Evangelico job, and have us rob a movie star's house, then have to escape the cops in the long, narrow Vinewood Hills roads. Vinewood Boulevard had a good amount of representation though, and showed the facade of Vinewood as a whole pretty well, but I always thought that the hills were underutilized unfortunately, and a lot of the homes are just fillers for the space. In GTA Online though, you can buy a few of the homes as stilt homes that have some pretty cool interiors, but overall are pretty similar to one another when taking a closer look. Still, it's cool that we at least have an interior for some of these homes, but unfortunately, still no story missions in Online to progress the chapter of the Vinewood Hills any further. As touched on earlier, the homes of Vinewood don't have that much going on with them. 5M is great and terrible at the same time for this, because it shows what is possible within the game if Rockstar wanted to. Homes with incredible interiors that are fully detailed and exclusive to each home, and not just a simple reskin. It's been rumored for years that a mansion update is coming or possible, but honestly, I wouldn't place any bets on it. It's been a long time since these rumors have surfaced, and Rockstar has not given us any information on it. And quite frankly, I think they would have done it by now if they wanted to. But you never know. Maybe for a final update, or one close to the end of GTA Online's lifespan, you get this update, as it wouldn't be entirely hard or impossible for Rockstar to pull off. Just add some standard contact missions that showcase the new mansions and hillside homes, and then after completing them, allow us to buy them. Something simple, it doesn't have to be crazy, just have the houses as the main showcase of the update. But once again, it's very unclear as to whether Rockstar even wants to do this or not. So stay posted and keep your prayers up. Vinewood is a special place in San Andreas. It's the face of the game as we know it today. I remember seeing the Vinewood sign for the very first time, and as someone from nearby LA, not from it, but a city very close to it, I instantly recognized it as the Hollywood sign and thought it was so cool that Rockstar went above and beyond to showcase LA in their own fashion. A place that I could visit, a place that I have visited many times. I could see it in a game and freely explore it anytime I wanted to. I just thought it was so awesome. But even anyone not from LA instantly recognized it. Just Google LA and you'll see the Hollywood sign very quickly. And that's why I love Vinewood so dearly. People from other countries can see and explore such a well-known area of America freely in a game that pretty accurately depicts it. It allows people who live a different life to see and experience the life that many people live abroad, which at the end of the day should always be the goal of a game or film. It puts you in a place to escape to, a place to explore, a place to be of different existence than you currently have. And hopefully the same can be done for GTA 6. Hopefully people from different countries fantasizing about coming to America can freely visit another extremely popular state and city in America, and that will be depicted as Leonida in GTA 6. And I don't doubt for a second that Rockstar will execute this very well. It's only a matter of time of waiting, and that's all we can say for now. But as for Vinewood, you can experience it today by loading up Grand Theft Auto 5. And that is it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I honestly wish this video could have been longer, but as I said during the video, Rockstar just didn't give Vinewood all that much representation or content in the game. And it's been a very long time. I highly doubt at this point that we will ever get it. But once again, who knows, maybe we'll get a mansion update, and finally, the Vinewood Hills will be accurately and fully represented in GTA Online. But only time will tell.
Mirror Park is a small suburb just on the eastern outskirts of Los Santos. It is commonly known as a place for hipsters to go to only to watch Fame or Shame while sipping on some bean machine. But it wasn't always like this. This place used to be a cesspool of gang members and violence. So today, we will explore the gritty past of Mirror Park and try to piece together the complicated puzzle of its success. Also, for the sake of context, I'm going to assume that Glen Park in GTA San Andreas is the suburb that Mirror Park is today. This is unconfirmed in the Grand Theft Auto universe, but it helps provide background for some areas as we only know so much about Mirror Park as is. And if you do enjoy this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel. It basically tells the YouTube algorithm that people like my content, so suggests it to more people. But now, we shall begin. The year is 1992, and situated right in the heart of gangland present in San Andreas lies Mirror Park. The area is sprawling with members of the gang known as the Ballists. They are marked by their purple attire and will shoot any rival gang member on sight without hesitation. The area is also very poor. We can deduce this by the homes present in this area. One of the main developments in the area is a Spanish bungalow court. These are a series of homes placed in parallel to each other on one large plot of land, with small spaces in between the homes that connect to a larger walkway that runs directly in the middle of the plot. The bungalow court is built this way so as to provide affordable housing, as you can have up to 6 family units on a single plot of land, while also allowing some social interaction as the homes are all connected, so it is likely that during your time living here, you will get acquainted with your neighbors at some point. Most of the other homes in the area follow a similar trend, except they are just single-family homes on a dedicated plot of land, still following the traditional Spanish theme, however. The homes tell us that the area is inherently intended to be affordable, and sometimes that attracts the wrong type of person. Mirror Park was actually in a highly favorable location in Los Santos originally. The local train ran right next to the suburb, within a 5-minute walk of it, allowing easy transportation from in and out of the area to people who worked outside of the locale. Mirror Park was already in very close proximity to downtown Los Santos, however. A bus ride or taxi into the city and back home was a reasonable mode of transportation for the residents. Mirror Park in 2013 is in a similar situation with slightly less favorable circumstances. The city migrated further towards the coast, making Mirror Park a bit further from the hustle and bustle of the city. The railway was also converted exclusively for commercial use. The railway is still there, but no longer carries passengers. This basically gave the residents an ultimatum: get a job within the suburb itself, or find other transportation to work outside of the radius. And it seems like lots of people didn't choose the latter, with businesses like a gas station, auto shop, barber shop, a mini market, and a shopping plaza all being present in the area. However, take note of these businesses and what experience is required for these places, and also take into account the type of person who lives in Mirror Park by 2013. Most of them are millennials who probably despise the idea of a college degree, and most of these jobs do not require them. They are jobs that anyone can have with the proper training, but without the requirement of school. It seems that the area has been the subject of gentrification. Because of the opportunities Los Santos provides, The housing market probably rose as well to accommodate the supply and demand dynamics of the area. No longer could gang members afford to even live here anymore. They had to move to the southern districts of Los Santos, including Murrieta Heights and the area of Davis, which remained affordable as it was already gang-infested and too far away from the city to remain desirable. Back in Mirror Park though, things had gotten much better than in prior decades because of all of these factors. Gone were the bungalow courts, as affordable housing wasn't entirely the main focus of Mirror Park anymore. It had transitioned into a middle-class neighborhood. Single-family homes were still present, but were no longer made with cheap materials. Two-story homes were also present in the area in fewer numbers. We can also see that more homes are in development to the eastern side of Mirror Park. Though it has been a while since these homes have been under construction, the project has come to a standstill. But why? Mirror Park is everything you want from a suburb in Los Santos, right? Yes, and that is exactly the problem. The type of person who now lives in Mirror Park is no longer a gang member, but even worse, a hipster. If you do not embrace the life that is present in Mirror Park, you will grow to hate the area rather quickly, because that is all that is present here. Mirror Park now lies at a stalemate. Outsiders don't want to move in because of the type of person who lives in Mirror Park, and even if they do, they need to have the income to sustain it. And if they have that quality, Mirror Park is likely not on their radar. The area around Mirror Park has since been developed further as well, with the biggest addition being the Diamond Casino and Resort, driving the value of the average home in Mirror Park up even further. It was able to rise from the depths of gang violence, but is now constricted by the urban hipsters who plague the area. It's like that one town that everybody thinks is nice to visit, but terrible to live in. It has a lot going for it though. Good location, nice homes, good weather, but the people is where it lacks. Despite this, Mirror Park itself has grown a substantial amount over the years, to the point where it can no longer really expand at all. The Ellis River runs from the north to the western sides of the suburb, locking it in from that direction. To the south lies a freeway entrance and main street that then converts into industrial space for the city, so no expansion can be done on that angle. Then to the east lies the Tataviam Mountains. It would be quite the task to attempt to push this mountain range back, and would cost more than what would be able to be made in terms of residential land. Regulations might also prohibit this plan as the mountains secure the Land Act reservoir nearby. It's just more trouble than what it's worth. Mirror Park has simply grown to its limits, and with the newest development still being under construction, it seems unlikely that it'll grow anymore, even if it had the space for it. Mirror Park has had a windy path to where it is now. Unlike places like Grapeseed or Sandy Shores, the area is the strong suit, with the people being the weak link. The failure of modern-day Mirror Park is at no fault of its own. It has strong job opportunities, being located so close to downtown Los Santos, with decent homes that are relatively expensive, but they could cost more, and they do in other areas of LS. Mirror Park's biggest problem has always been its residents. Initially gang members, with hipsters taking their place now. This is unlikely to change, however, as the gang members only move due to the increasing cost of living in the suburb. Hipsters unfortunately could afford to stay here, as they likely have good jobs at tech companies like Life Invader or iFruit. Mirror Park has also not been updated one time in 11 years of GTA Online's existence. There are not even businesses located here available to the players. So you have to wonder, is that on purpose? Is Mirror Park supposed to be held up in the air in the game? My assumptions say the latter. Every other area in the game has seen updates except for this area, so Mirror Park has two options going forward. It dies as the hipster-filled suburb that it is, or is updated soon as GTA Online's lifespan has begun to run its course. We can only speculate for now, and ultimately, only time will tell.